Okay, so I finished grading your second discussions, and since we're now at a point where we pretty much know who's going to be in the class, I wanted to go over the big points of this discussion. Now, this is very broad. I've made specific comments in your papers. I would encourage you, please, to look at them because some of you are beginning to make the same mistakes consistently, particularly with citation. Um, for those of you who did discussion one, discussion two seems to be better overall. For those of you who did not do discussion one, then you definitely need to look at the comments that I make so that you can start doing things better. I realize that you've already posted your top post for discussion three, but that doesn't mean, and I've got this in the hint section at the end, that you still can't bring that grade up by doing things in the peer comments that develop the content more. So to go over quickly the big points of discussion two, which is about the agricultural revolution, the question basically comes down to, was it a good or a bad thing? Now, of course, those are very subjective. And you'll find that most of my questions are going to be subjective. It's not about what your opinion is or what the opinion of the authors are. It's about how well they're supported. That's the big thing when we're talking about writing history. And as we get to the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about what historiography is because that's part of what we do in this course. Um, but for right now, the big thing I want to look at is what you needed to have in your discussion posts. So here are the big things. For every good, there's a bad. Here we go. Good things about the agricultural revolution: it produces more food, which leads to larger populations. Now, that in and of itself, right there, is a larger population a good thing? I asked many of you that, particularly in my comments to you in the discussion things. We have the largest population humanity's ever seen on the planet right now, and it's not a good thing. There's extreme poverty. It's causing climate change. We've got all kinds of massive problems. So throwing out there the phrase larger populations, what does that mean? How is that good, right? So think about these things that you say when you write what you're writing. Don't assume we're all on the same page about the same thing. What we mean in this sense, though, is that, of course, it does expand, or the human population does grow in those places that adopt agriculture. But it also can be bad because this new lifestyle is very challenging for the human body. It's backbreaking work. They have to figure out how to store this food so they can use it later, which becomes problematic and also becomes a problem with defending it. And it's not always possible to store enough. As some of you, a select few, pointed out, the transition takes thousands of years because it's not easy work. And because it doesn't provide food year round, not at first. It takes a long time to figure out how to store this stuff so that it can be there during the winter months, right? During the non-harvesting months. All right, so things to consider there, good or bad. Um, Whoops, sorry, skipped over that one. All right, more food production allows for more people to focus on other things. So we're going to get specialization developing. We're going to get social stratification. That is good because we can develop technology, trade, certainly more extended trade, writing. Originally, as a byproduct of trade in almost all these societies, writing is developed mainly for record keeping to figure out where stuff is, where it's going, where it should be, how much it's worth, etc. But that's going to lead to other things that you can do with writing as well. It's going to lead to organized religion, developing social structures and rules for people to live with, laws, things like that. All of that comes out of it for social organization. But in the bad point, it gives a social hierarchy in which we create in almost all societies a very elite small group at the top dictating to everybody else what they're going to do, with the vast majority of people living at the bottom. And in fact, we're going to get such a vast majority of people that we're also going to create slavery so that this really hard backbreaking work can be done by people who are forced to do it. In order to get slaves, we develop wars so that not only do we get slaves, we get the land that those people had originally been working, and now they're going to be working their land, but they're going to be doing it to produce food for other people. We're also going to get poverty. Instead of equality and people sharing things as they had done in hunter-gatherer societies, you're going to get strict social hierarchies where there are going to be some people who literally are going to die of starvation because they can't produce enough food to pay the tax structure that comes into place with the new social hierarchy, right? All right. So good, settled households mean you get more children. Unlike today, when we have this idea that childhood is a particular phase in life where young people aren't given responsibility, that doesn't exist in the past. This whole construct of childhood comes about in the 1800s more so. Until that point in time, children are basically just considered to be little adults, and they're expected to pull their weight in the family as well. So more population means more children, which means the ability to produce more food, but also it leads to a decline in both the quality of life and the life expectancy of women for almost all of human history, and certainly exacerbated by the agricultural revolution. Women's lives become shorter because the leading cause of death for women historically has been childbirth. Also, during years of bad harvests, more people are going to die, and one of the primary targets of that starvation is going to be children. So while you want to say, hey, great, larger population, that also means more people dying for specific reasons, right? All right. I asked you consistently to compare Diamond and Harari. Both of them talk about the bad things that come from the agricultural revolution. Diamond particularly focuses on the ecological destruction, the extinction of certain animals and plants, the idea that hunter-gatherers were also, in many parts of the world, driven to extinction, the creation of many more diseases due to humans literally living with animals, as in building one building structure and animals living either in the same space or under it. And of course, more competition for land, which leads to more wars and more violence. Harari focuses more so on the individual, how it changes human lives themselves, the loss of autonomy, the shift from a relatively pleasant life of hunter-gatherers wandering around, maybe working, he estimates 35 to 40 hours a week to accumulate the food they need to live on, unlike sedentary peoples who find themselves literally working from sunup to sundown to produce food. The creation again of these social structures that benefit a very few at the expense of the majority, and of course more danger to women because of childbirth. In general, other bad things, the creation of patriarchy, slavery, and inequality, right? All right, so general reminders now that we are in week 3. It is time for you to consider this. And again, I've made notes in your week 2 discussions. You must cite internally within the body of your discussion posts, your primary source analyses, anything you submit to me, all of your required sources, which means for this week, you must have had citation for your whichever textbook you're using. The secondary sources always, this particular week, week 2, it was Harari and Diamond, and your multimedia. And you need to identify your multimedia to me, right? And by that I mean you need to be sure that you have all of those cited in the body of your work and of course in the works cited itself. All sourcing, whether it is cited the internal citation or the works cited citation, should start with the author or producer, not a title, not a location. Citing it as OpenStax, no, that's not it. If you're using the Cordes et al. Textbook, that's how it should be cited from the start. Cordes et al. ET space AL period means and all the rest. So that all you have to do is put the first author's name in there. If you have a book, textbook or whatever that's written by 3 or more people, you can just put the first one and then et al. That tells me the rest. From this point on, if you have no internal citation in the body of your discussion, I'm going to flat out delete it, and I'm not sending you a little notice telling you to repost it. That's going to be up to you. And it's going to be posted. I'm going to penalize it for late penalty from the point in time that I have to delete it or from the day that it was due until whenever you repost it correctly. So keep up. If you go and see that your post is not there, maybe you need to double check what you posted and make sure it has its internal citation and the works cited. Please, please. This is required. It's mandatory. We're in week 2. I shouldn't have to be sending out these little messages anymore after this, and I'm not going to. I've got many other things to do. I'm just going to delete it. You can figure out why it's not there. If you truly can't figure out why it's not there, email me. Because sometimes, and I've noticed this a lot, especially at certain times of the day, when you go to post, the post won't take. I'm having that problem personally in especially on Friday mornings when I go through trying to make comments on your top discussion post. Sometimes it won't take. Usually it'll tell you that it doesn't take, and usually if you're looking at it, you can see that it didn't post. But yeah, you can check with that also. If you do have your post and it has citation in it and you don't see it, um, email me and I'll let you know if I deleted it for some reason. But if it's not for citation, then I'm not going to randomly delete it, or I'm not going to do it without letting you know. But from this point on, if it doesn't have that citation, I am, and I'm not going to take my time announcing it to you again. All right. You need to have in the body of your discussion a separate paragraph to compare and contrast the perspective or biases of your sources. This is, again, a big part of what we're doing with this historiographic approach to history. As I've said before, history is in constant flux. Authors have different ideas about things, and you're seeing that. Specifically this week, Harari and Diamond both had sections in the text that you should have read talking about the advantages and disadvantages of the agricultural revolution, but they focus on them from 2 different ideas. Diamond was looking very specifically at the ecological destruction, whereas Harari's looking at the downside and the quality of life for individual humans. So that's a pretty big thing. Think about that when you're analyzing these sources. Some of you, a select few, have actually done some really good work of using the sources in different paragraphs and talking about it there, combining it with information to discuss what these things are. That's fine too. But if you're not doing that, then you need to have that specific separate paragraph talking about their biases. All right, so I've used the word historiography, historiographic approach. What is historiography? Well, it literally is the history of how we tell the story of history. Yes, I know. Isn't that interesting? It's an historical analysis of the writing of history, literally. The best example I can give you of this right now is that for hundreds of years, and in fact, enough so that many of you adopted the same approach, historians have viewed the agricultural revolution as being a wonderful thing, right? Many of you threw the same platitudes at me that historians have done traditionally. More population, more complex societies, politics, religion, writing, technology. It's only been in the past probably 50 years that historians have started looking at it and saying, maybe there was a downside to it. And part of this is because we're finding out more and more about the lives of hunter-gatherers, and because we're also seeing today things like climate change and trying to figure out, well, when did that start? Well, Diamond would argue with you that it starts with the agricultural revolution. And a lot of other scientists would do the same. So the way we tell the story of history is changing. It's constantly changing as we find out new things. And that's a big part of what we're looking at here. It's a big part of what I want you to see in comparing these sources. A couple of you have made what I would consider to be the fatal and tragic mistake of suggesting to me that there's just too much to read. I'm like, yeah, okay. I don't advise shortcutting because that's the point of what we're doing. It's not just looking at the history itself, but it's also looking at why the history is what it is, or why these people say what they say. What is that perspective? What is that bias? How is it beginning to change the way we tell this particular story, right? All right, so some subtle hints for future discussions, stemming at this point off this. I'm going to ask you questions about your posts, right? I try to ask everybody. In fact, it's only if you're posting really late, like on Monday afternoon, that I'm not going to post something back to you because I'm probably not going to see it until Tuesday morning. Maybe I might see it late Monday evening, but by that point in time, I'm going to assume you're not going to be looking to see what I ask you. But I'm going to try to get to all of you by Sunday at the latest. Look at the questions I'm asking you. If I'm asking you standard things like, hey, What's your multimedia? Or, hey, what does the textbook say? That means I don't see that cited in the body of your post, which means you're leaving out something required, and that's a pretty generic thing you need to rectify so that you get a good grade, or at least a passing grade, on the discussion post itself. Also, though, look at what I'm asking everybody else. With this particular question or this particular discussion, I ask a lot of you the question, why did Harari consider the agricultural revolution a big fraud? And I even cited it with page number, page 77. A lot of you, I'm guessing, hadn't read all of Harari. Not a good idea, because that was a big part of the focus of why I wanted you to get to this. If I'm asking a question and I'm directing people to a specific place, be sure you've looked at that place and you're addressing that issue too. Even if I don't ask you directly, if there's something else in your post that I find more interesting or, unfortunately, more basic, and I don't get you to that, look at what I'm asking other people and consider putting that in your peer responses as well, especially if you didn't hit it in your top post. Answer my questions as thoroughly as you can. It will certainly help your peer comment grade, and your peer comment grade is the biggest portion. It's 1.5 points out of 4 of your overall grade on your discussions. That's a pretty big deal. That's part of why I ask you questions as I'm going along, so you can supplement what you put in your top post. And it, not even just with me, think about it with your other peer responses as well. You want to have those to be thorough, substantive information in them that either addresses a point made in the top post to which you're responding, or that brings something into play that you think is interesting. Try to put those things in. It demonstrates to me that you are understanding the breadth and scope of the material, even if it's not related directly to the question that I asked. Read the required sources. Don't cheat. Don't go off and read a Cliff Notes version of Harari or a lit summary or a book review, because those are not a Harari's words. They're somebody else's interpretation. I won't count that as you having read the source if you cite it that way. Don't do it. There's a reason I have you using the sources that I have you using. Please use them. For citation purposes, if you're still having difficulty, especially in the work citing things, I've put all those citations for the required sources in the summary, or in the syllabus, sorry, in the syllabus. I also, if I use a source in the course of the discussion, will put the format that I want in there. Look at those. That's an easy, basically quick way to know how you need to cite. And post on time. Starting with this week 2's discussion post that I'm sending back, if you posted late, you're going to get hit with the penalty. Nobody emailed me specifically to request an extension on the deadline for a valid reason. Thus, I'm taking off the 10% per day of your total if you submitted a post late. They are due, the top post is due on Thursday, by Thursday night. You can submit early. In fact, some of you are, and I really appreciate that. But they are definitely due by midnight Thursday night. If they're coming in late, you're going to start getting penalized. I would also point out peer comments are due on 3 different days. If you're not doing them on 3 different days, your peer comment grade is going to be lower. So think about that. All right. I will be sending them back out. Hopefully, in fact, by the time you see this, you should have gotten them. So please look at the comments I'm making. If you don't understand comments that I'm making in specifically to you, ask me. I will look at it and tell you or extrapolate in more detail. One of the big things, though, like I said, you want to be as thorough as you can be. You need to use all the sources, and you need to think about where the sources contradict each other or present something in a different way from the way it was presented somewhere else, because that's a big part of where we're going with this. All right, I'm going to try to do these little videos every week at the end of the discussion to give you the big hits on them, mainly because when we get to the midterm, you're going to be seeing all of this or a lot of these ideas again. So Bear that in mind. The midterm is not actually at midterm, strangely enough. It's actually somewhere around week 5 to 6. So be thinking about that and how that's going to operate. All right. Um, Again, look over my comments to you and let me know if you have questions. Thanks.